I'm Jake Miller from the Educational Duct Tape Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect those of others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hello, EduMagicians. Welcome to the EduMagic Podcast with your host, Dr. Sam Fessich. Dr. Sam is a professor of education, author of EduMagic, and a pumpkin spice latte fan. This podcast is designed for pre-service teachers. Remember, friends, teaching doesn't begin at graduation, but during that first class at 8 a.m. Let's get this party started.
Welcome, EduMagicians. I have an amazing guest with us today. Her name is Rebecca Gibboney, and we met probably about 3 or 4 years ago at a KTI conference, but we met before that as a virtual co-op, and Becky has been informing the lives and investing in the lives of pre-service teachers ever since. She has an amazing story and amazing journey to share with you all today, and I'm so excited to have her on. So Becky, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, Sam. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about your teaching journey and what has called you to be an educator.
Well, it's really funny. As you know, I was thinking about everything. It was a huge plot twist. So I never thought I was going to get into education. My whole family's educators. My mom, actually my uncle is too, my grandmothers, everyone's in education. And I wasn't really planning to get in that field. I was actually going to school to be a prison counselor, because I wanted to help the lives and make impacts. And in my 12th grade creative writing class, we had to do a job shadow. So I went and visited the prisons. And it was a lot eye-opening for me and a little bit of a culture shock. And I'm this happy-go-lucky, positive, good morning, sunshine kind of person. And I was like, Mom, I think I'm going to get punched you never know. I just don't think it would be perceived very well. But I continued and I went to Lycoming College and I took my first course in psychology. And I just didn't feel like that's where my heart belonged. And so huge plot twist happened when my Spanish professor pulled me in and she was like, you're really good at Spanish. Have you ever considered? And of course, I only did Spanish just because my friends did it. It was fun. It was easy to me. Oh, that's cool how they live life. So I never really thought of anything serious about Spanish. But when she approached me, she sort of she did impact my life and gave me the confidence. And I had always had teaching on the back burner. Okay, well, if this doesn't work out, I could teach. I'm so used to it. I'd always go in the classroom. So then, once I thought about that, I was like, well, what would I be good at? What could I be creative with? And then when she mentioned Spanish, I was like, wow, she's right. So then started my journey as a Spanish teacher. So I actually did not decide to be a teacher until my sophomore year of college. And after I graduated from college, I had job interviews. And I actually ended up taking a part-time position over a full-time position. Because I just had this gut feeling that it was the place I belonged. And so I ended up my first year working part-time and then doing tons of side jobs at school just to get myself in there. Wrote a middle school curriculum for Spanish at the district at Loyalsock Township School District in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and ended up getting full-time that next year. So I've been there for 9 years. About 5 years ago, I started also doing instructional coaching, which was an awesome thing to have as another hat. And I'm currently now transitioning out of the district to a curriculum specialist and online learning staff. So.
Right. That's amazing. I don't know if a lot of people have the guts to do to choose part-time over full-time. What called you? What made you feel that was the right move for you?
A lot of people ask me that, and it's just, I always tell when I work with the pre-service teachers at Lycoming College, you have to follow your gut. And I was fortunate enough to have a very supportive family that they didn't think I was crazy necessarily. They were just they felt the same way, follow your heart. and they would sit down with me and look at the financials, like, this is how you can afford this. And, I lived it rough for, a good year or two with, student loans and all that stuff. And sometimes I strongly believe that's what you got to do, and it'll pay off in the end. So I just took that leap of faith.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
So think back to your Lycoming college days. Do you have a favorite teaching moment from that time in your life?
It was so hard to think back to then, because it was 11 years ago. But, I'm a really big person with teaching. I'm a really big educator, I should say, teaching the whole student and not just the content. I think I fall in love with that more than I do the content that's in front of me. Each one of those students has a story. And so in my student teaching experience, my one Spanish 2 class, every time I'd try to give a life lesson, they'd be like, oh, here goes Lead again. At this time, it was my maiden name. So my last day, they made this book of life lessons from Senorita. And so it was really cool that it stuck with them. I used to make them do silly things on the top of their tests, like, I'm going to dominate this test. And so I think that's sort of my biggest takeaway. I had a lot of ups and downs. I had a really tough co-op, but she was really good. She told me things that I didn't really want to hear, but I needed to hear. And I had some big upses that I was like, oh my God, I'm never fit for this. But it was good. It made me who the educator I am today. And so, yeah, that was probably the biggest one, the life lessons from Senorita. But
I love that. Do you have a picture of what they gave you or something of?
So it was definitely in my teaching portfolio, back in the day when we had those big binders.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So it's definitely there. And I also have a sunshine box that I always tell educators to have, because it's, you put all those feel good things in there. So those days where you're like, yeah, definitely this isn't for me, you pull that out and you remember why you're teaching. But yeah, it was fun.
I love
some things
that.
I didn't even know I said, but yeah.
I totally agree that every educator should have a sunshine box or a sunshine drawer where they keep all those positive notes that they got from students past and present, and it really keeps you focused. Oh yeah, I am making a difference, and
yeah,
how.
Exactly.
Excellent. So this podcast is called EduMagic, and so we're going to focus on an area or two. It looks like we have two here that we're going to talk about regarding EduMagic. Let's start with uniting your PLN. Why is this an area that pre-service teachers should grow in?
I think that a PLN really rejuvenates you as an educator. And so our story, even you and I, you and me, Spanish teacher, we met over Twitter 10 years ago, 11 years ago when I was going through student teaching. It never existed. So the power of PLNs has exploded. And what I found, teachers ask me, again, I tend to be very positive, sometimes too much, but I don't think there's such a thing. But I guess I could be a little too much if you're having a bad day. But they're always like, how do you do it? And I think it's really important, get yourself out there. Yes, there are negative Nancy's, but that's in any job. That's in life, even if you're not a teacher. And so I really tried not to do that. And so when you build your PLN, you get comfortable with the people in your building. But then what I found is that what's rejuvenated me even more is connecting outside of my district. So people like you, the PAECT family, the KTI family, the Edu Match family that you got me into. So I think it is super important to get connected, and you don't have to be an 11-year teacher or a first-year teacher. You ask questions. But that's what's going to fuel yourself. They say, maybe it was Rachel Hollis's book, I can't remember, but you are she's great.
Love her.
You are the first, the 5 people you hang out with the most. And so I really started focusing on that in my profession. I don't want to attract to those walnut trees. If you read that Find Your Marigold article, I don't want to attract to those walnut trees. I'm there and I can be positive and a marigold to them, but I need to connect myself with people that I want to be like and that push me. And something that was not hard, but a little challenging for me is I felt like I needed to be connected to everyone. And I don't think that's necessarily true. It's sort of like your best friends. I tell my students all the time, you don't need 50 best friends. You need 1 or 2 best friends that really support you, push you, challenge you, question you to make you be better every day. And so I think that's what you aim for in a PLN. So.
Absolutely. I love that. I tell my students also, just because someone follows you on social doesn't mean you have to follow them back. Look
Correct.
at their bio, read who they're following, see what their last 5 posts were. If that's going to help you grow as a teacher, then heck yeah, follow them. But if not, don't follow them. And that's okay.
For sure. And there can be such a thing as too many, you know?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk a little about getting out of the college classroom, getting out of the comfort zone or regularly scheduled programming during your college career. Can you share a little bit about that advice for pre-service teachers?
Yeah. If anyone asked me, they'd probably laugh. Or if you asked them about me, because I'm not a traditional teacher, and that's what I would always say to my students. My classroom is not a traditional classroom. And I not only challenge my students, but I think I challenge my administrators as well. And I know it's a little hard for pre-service teachers because you're student teaching, but I think it's important that you always envision what you want for your classroom. You might have guidelines while you're you're student teaching, your pre-service teacher, and then even your first 3 years until you get tenured, if you want to be realistic. But then you can start really creating what you envision. And I think it's 110% okay to not be the traditional teacher. Getting out of your classroom. I've probably gone to so many conferences because I've advocated for myself. And I found ways that my classroom can run when I'm not there, which doesn't mean that I'm replaced. I strongly believe that teachers you cannot be replaced because you teach that empathy. But it could be virtual or face-to-face, get to conferences. I also encourage everyone to travel, be interested and intrigued, but be open. And then as far as in the classroom, I connect my students with Skype, through Skype in the classroom. Right. That's huge. And I know I'm a Spanish teacher, but I don't just do Spanish, connecting them to Spanish, because it's a global it's a competitive world out there that's global. And by the time our students and our children are graduating, they're going to be interviewing against people from all over the world, and their bosses could be from all over the world. So I always explain to them, it's important that you know and you're culturally competent in this 21st century world. So we've Skyped from schools from Kenya and Argentina, Poland, and I think that's important, and they appreciate that. It's hard for me when I hear teachers say, well, I'm an English teacher, I'm a math teacher, how am I supposed to do that? If it's important to you, you find a way. Getting out of the scheduled program, I think it's really important, and something that I think my students really enjoyed about our content was, we listened to our students. We didn't listen to the curriculum. I know we do pacing guides, but if my students aren't getting it, I need to make sure they get it. I need to find a way. I need to be innovative. I know the content, I know the strategy, like Weston, the Bold School, the model there, I know my outcome, I know the strategies I want to use, but what's that technology tool, or what's that innovative piece that I can add to my students nowadays that can really hook them? And nowadays there's so many different ways that you can run your classroom, whether it be station rotation or anything. I think that's important. And I think the number one thing is getting out of the comfort zone. That is, to me, the biggest thing. Recently in my life, I've taken a lot of leaps of faith. I'm even drinking right now from my What If mug. That's one of my new blog posts coming.
Nice.
Because I think that's important. I think every occupation is like that, but I think education is very strong in that, where every year you're learning. So, I challenge pre-service teachers. Every year I pick one new thing that I want to try in my classroom. I don't, for 11 years now, I've tried one new thing every year, and I've tried to focus on, well, it's hard because I like to try a lot of things, but I try to focus on one thing. So something I've been saying to my students this year, that the world is your playground. Like, go play, stop taking it so seriously, and get out there and ask the what if questions, because if you say the what if and then you make it happen, then you're there, So reach, go beyond the limits, all that stuff.
I love that. The world is your playground. That's fantastic. That's great advice for all students and teachers to hear. Thank you. People
always said to me, you're going to burn out, because I would do so many things. And I still do. I think some educators have that. They can do a lot. And just because you can do a lot doesn't mean the educator beside you can do a lot. And so I think it's important. I think balance is a funny word because everyone balances differently. And you can be balanced, but in one of my presentations, I say, how long does a seesaw stay balanced? I mean, if you think about it, rarely, like it'll tip. And so when we talk about balance, I think you can't compare yourself to other people. But I do think that pre-service teachers need to take a step back and think about, okay, how can I balance myself before I you don't want it to tip and stay down. Like, how do you balance yourself? And what does balance mean to you? What are your priorities? And then to focus on those positives. It's okay to get criticism. And I think that's hard just because, and I don't know if you go out and do observations on your students, but just because you get one piece of feedback doesn't mean that the world is crashing and you made the worst decision. Right. It means that you have growth. And I think that's huge. You need to look at it as a growth mindset and not that you're stuck. Like, oh, I'm not what's good for kids.
Right. Put it in perspective.
Correct. Yes. So there's a lot of things, a lot of advice I give, but that number one is probably just, thinking about what balance means to you. Because if an outsider looked at my life and how I live my education world, they might be like, you do everything. How do you balance it? Like, there's no way you're balanced. But, I also think that what I do motivates me. It gets me out of bed every morning, and that's important.
That is so important. You have to do what your heart is designed for, and you have to be able to get out of bed excited to do the great work that we do each day with students and teachers. And Becky, where can my listeners find you online? Where are all the places they can find you, and what things do you have up and coming that they can look forward to hearing about from you?
Well, on Twitter, I'm at Becky Lead, and I mainly Twitter. Facebook I have as well. That's more for my personal, but I share it out. That's one thing I've said in an interview. Like, I do friend. Again, schools are different. My students are friends with me on social media because I feel as an educator, it's my place to really mold them and show them how social media can be used in a positive way.
All right, friends, there you have it. Another great episode of the EduMagic podcast. I want to thank Becky for being on the show. If you want to check out her book, it's called Tiebreaker. You can find it over on Amazon. And let me just say, I loved the advice she gave us about going out, going to conferences, getting out of our comfort zone, and trying one new thing in your classroom each year. You can try out gamification like Becky talks about in her book, or you can try out new technology tools and see how they engage students. Be innovative and don't stop learning. All right, friends, until next time, remember, you have the EduMagic within you.
And there you have it, EduMagicians. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends. For more EduMagic, check out sfessage.com and follow Dr. Sam on Twitter and Instagram at sfessage. Until next time, you have the EduMagic within you.